Hey there, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are cracking the code of life itself. We're talking about genetics. We're going to break down exactly how traits get passed down from one generation to the next, starting with the original rulebook and then exploring some really fascinating exceptions.
All right, let's kick things off with a question that I'm pretty sure every single one of us has thought about at some point. It's this amazing mix of familiar and unique that is right at the heart of genetics, and trust me, by the end of this explainer, you'll get the science behind it.
So here's what we've got on tap today. We're going to start with the OG of genetics, Gregor Mendel, to learn the basic rules. Then, we'll see what happens when nature decides to get creative with things like incomplete dominance, codominance, and multiple alleles. And finally, we'll wrap it all up.
Okay, let's get right into it. To really get a handle on inheritance, we've got to travel back in time to the 19th century and meet a brilliant monk named Gregor Mendel, who did some groundbreaking work with, of all things, pea plants.
Now, what's amazing is that Mendel had no clue about DNA or genes as we know them today. He just knew something was being passed down, and he called these things factors. Today, of course, we call them genes. And he figured out that for every trait, you get two of these factors, one from each parent. The different versions of those factors are what we call alleles.
And this led him to his first huge insight, the law of dominance. The main idea here is that when you get two different alleles for a trait, one of them, the dominant one, basically calls all the shots and completely hides the effect of the other one, the recessive allele. For instance, in his pea plants, the allele for purple flowers was dominant over the one for white flowers.
His second law, the law of segregation, is just as critical. You see, he figured out that when an organism makes its, reproductive cells, sperm or eggs, that pair of alleles for a trait splits up. They segregate. This means each parent only passes on one of their two alleles for every trait to their
And here's the kicker. These two laws, they perfectly predicted what Mendel was seeing over and over again in his experiments. When he crossed his pea plants, the second generation always showed a ratio of 3 individuals with the dominant phenotype, that's the trait you can actually see, for every one with the recessive phenotype. That 3-to-1 ratio, that's the classic signature of simple inheritance.
Okay, but here's the thing. Mendel's rules are like the perfect, simple starting point. But nature, well, nature loves to get a little more creative. So let's look at our first big exception to the rulebook, incomplete dominance. And a fantastic example of this is the beautiful snapdragon flower. So let's set the stage. We start with what's called the pea generation. That's the parent generation. One parent is a red flower, and its genetic makeup, its genotype, is capital R, capital R. The other parent is a white flower with a genotype of lowercase r, lowercase r.
Now, if Mendel's law of dominance held true, you would expect the first batch of offspring, the F1 generation, to all be red, right? But that is not what happens at all. Instead, every single one of the offspring is pink.
So, what's going on? Why pink? Well, it's because that red allele, the capital R, isn't completely dominant over the white one. Neither one totally takes over. Instead, you get this beautiful blend of the two. You can kind of think of the R allele as a recipe for red pigment. If you have two of them, you get a lot of pigment, so the flower is bright red. But if you only have one, you get half the pigment, which makes the flower look pink.
But here is where things get really cool. You take two of those pink F1 flowers and cross them, and suddenly those original parent colors pop right back out in the next generation. What you get is a phenotypic ratio of 1 red flower to 2 pink flowers to 1 white flower.
And when we peek under the hood at the actual genes, the genotypes, we see exactly why. The genotypic ratio is also 1 to 2 to 1. A quarter of them are RR, so they're red. Half of them are RR, they're pink, and the last quarter are RR, making them white. This is totally different from Mendel's 3-to-1 ratio, and it's the dead giveaway for incomplete dominance.
All right, so we've seen blending. Now let's check out another twist, where the rules aren't just bent, they're shared. This brings us to codominance and the whole idea of multiple alleles.
This is called codominance, and it's where both alleles are kind of like coworkers that both want to be seen. Neither one bosses the other around. Instead, they both show up for work, fully and separately. And the perfect example of this is the ABO blood group system in us humans.
And what's really neat is that the ABO system also introduces us to another concept, multiple alleles.
See, for most of the traits Mendel looked at, there were just two versions of a gene. But for blood type, in the human population as a whole, there are three different alleles floating around: IA, IB, and little I.
Okay, so this table really breaks it all down for us. It shows how, depending on which two of those three alleles you happen to inherit from your parents, your genotype results in one of the four main blood types: A, B, AB, or O.
So you can really see the different rules at play here all in one system. The IA and IB alleles are both completely dominant over the recessive I allele, but when they're together, they're co-dominant. If you get an IA from one parent and an IB from the other, you don't get some blend. Nope, you get blood type AB because both are fully expressed.
Okay, let's pull all of this together now. We started with Mendel's nice, neat rulebook of dominance and segregation, and now we've added these really cool layers of complexity on top. This right here, this is the big takeaway. It's a cheat sheet for everything we've talked about. With complete dominance, one allele completely hides the other, giving us that classic 3-to-1 ratio. With incomplete dominance, you get a blend, which results in that 1-to-2-to-1 ratio where the middle guy has his own look. And with co-dominance, both alleles show up, creating yet another pattern.
So, what's the big picture here? The fact that we have these foundational rules, but also all these amazing exceptions, what does that tell us about life itself? Well, it shows us that inheritance isn't just some rigid, messy process. It's actually this beautifully nuanced dance of information. And it's a great reminder that life, at its most basic level, is almost always more complex and wonderful than it first seems.